The following is rated TV MALSV. It contains strong language, violence, and nudity. It is intended only for mature audiences.
Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome to Darkroom, where the hidden becomes known. I'm your host, Devious Dave Rose, and today is March 31st, 2019. On this episode, we're discussing a live Q&A and strange events. Thanks for those that are joining us here today. We've got a lot of different things that I'm planning to bring up. Now, as you may know, if you are a listener of Darkroom, my titles don't usually describe what the show is about, and that's for good reason. Because if I was to put what they were truly about or use certain keywords, not only would the video would be shot down, but the whole channel would be striked. So, what we're going to do right now is we're going to go into the strange events. And that's just another key word, a code word, if you were, to what I've always tried to describe as the opposite of, it's a two-word sort of definition. And the first word is the opposite of true. And the second word is an equivalent to the cloth that a country uses to represent themselves. So, with that in mind, as I wait for any questions that might be posited to me in the chat, you can always call me on Skype at Devious Dave Rose. I'm going to show you a few images. And before I go into that, I don't expect many people to join us here on this afternoon, although I have a lot of information to share, just because it's not a normal time and I'm not getting plugs, and people might not be aware or around to view it, but this is just a little bit of planting the seeds and providing the information that I have access to so that you, the viewers, possibly can view it later on and see that what I was speaking about had a lot of truth. But let's start off with what happened in Charlottesville. Now, this is a subject that many people haven't really heard too much about, or what they did was basically what the mainstream media parroted. And in Charlottesville, Virginia, there was a Unite the Right rally. And later on, there was essentially what has been labeled as a hate crime on August 12th, 2017. So we're coming up to the 2-year anniversary. And there's a lot more truth that's hidden amongst the lies in this event. The great thing is, photographs are very useful, especially when you know the sources that they're coming from. So let's break down this event with a few things. And I just want to remind everyone that is listening right now, when I did make a video and speak about this and use those two words that start with F, the channel got striked, the video got removed. There's a big reason why this information is being hidden and why people are trying to remove it from the record. Removed. So let's move on and actually start to break this image down. And this is why I'm glad that those few people that have joined us are here, because I believe this is going to blow your mind. Now let's analyze, first of all, what we're seeing in this image. And I want to make sure that the image has shown up on the video stream so that you can see it. I normally try to make a broadcast that is both listener and viewer friendly, but this one will have a lot of images, so I do recommend that you check this out. Now, if we start to take a look at the license plate, this is not some sort of conspiracy theory. This is not any sort of convoluted sort of assessment on what you're seeing here, because I've got more information that will address the license plate, for example. But when you start to actually break these things down on the esoteric level, you can actually analyze what they're trying to tell you. So, for example, with this license plate, you've got the G, which is for the Gnostic or Geomantic, and that is obviously represented by the Freemason influence on this situation. The V obviously being for the vector, and F6, that, for those that know, 666, as well as the six-sided hexagram and such. They understand that. And then the two pillars of Masonic interest and legend. Now, more importantly, though, is look at the bumper sticker on the truck. Now, it's a common bumper sticker, actually, but in the photo that was published, it wasn't clearly visible. But because it's a common bumper sticker, you can clearly find out what it is. And it says, "No man stands so tall as when he stoops to help a child." And that is one of the sayings of the Shriners, which is another, not secret society, but society with secrets, just like the Freemasons. They make their information out public, but they put it in codes. And you cannot be a Shriner without being a Freemason. So we have here essentially allegiances that are placed in this video, in this photo that is released to demonstrate certain information. And we're going to go into that right now. So let's transition to the next image, because actually we're going to first go back to the original image so that everyone can see what was published. Now, what if I was to tell you this entire image was a composite? Now, before we go on, I just want to shout out Reality Chat, who's in the... Sorry, my apologies. Reality Shift, who is in the chat, and he has something to say, and I never censor anybody. I don't even know what he said. I just see that he's written something, so I'm going to say it. Whatever it is, uncensored. What is your thoughts on bosses who message your girlfriend complaining that you won't work for them? Although quite unrelated to what we're discussing, I would say that disappointing, ungentlemanlike, but not something that I would definitively approve of. But back to the... Oh, we've got another comment here. Nick Wolf says, I think it's MK Ultra attack. Interesting that you say that. Interesting that you say that. But let's just go with the flow as to what I've got ready to show you, because there is quite a lot of information to show. And we'll address that comment in just a short bit. Now, we see the original image that was published in the media. As I said, what would you think if this was a composite image? Well, I can assure you, as someone who is considered qualified enough to do professional graphic works for Fortune 500 companies, that this is in fact a composite. Let's start off with the first image over everything. We've got an image overlay of this individual. Understanding how cameras work, even digital cameras, you understand that there are a lot of anomalies in this image here. There are certain aspects that are blurred out, certain aspects that are too focused, and you start to realize that this entire image was fabricated, was manipulated. So you've got this first overlay image. But let's go on. What do we got underneath that? Well, we've got these actors here who, if you see in the other images and footages that I will eventually put up, were not in the same positions, did not have the same positions and body positions at this point. And then we can take a look at the multiple overlays that are placed here. When you start to break down this image, it becomes extremely easy to understand where the manipulation took place. And when you understand how, again, how photography works and the differences between focus, exposure, light settings, you realize that this image is just totally manipulated and not what was seen on live broadcasts that were shown to supposedly show this event. And here's one of the last images of this sequence that I'm going to show right now, which is the signs layer. Now, understanding also perspective, you'll see that the way that these images are placed, where the signs are, the distance that you can see, it is not possible with the location that it was set at, with the groups that are around this. And I'll be showing this in additional images tonight. But what you see in this image that was published to the public, from my opinion and from what I've shown you, and from all the research that I have done into this topic, is entirely and fully manipulated. It's a composite of multiple images put together that was pre-planned for a specific purpose, for a specific agenda. Now, you might not think that that proves anything. But let's start to take a look at further details. Let me just pull up another image here. This is one particular image that was taken photo-wise as soon as the hit was done, or the event took place, I should say. And you can see a particular individual that is featured there. Now, we're going to get back to him in a moment. But it's very important that I bring up a certain piece of information. Now, I've had to censor the word here in this image, because you never know how the Google algorithms are going to affect this. But how can you spot one of these strange events? Well, there's immediate nationwide coverage. There's a clear political agenda that's displayed. Usually it's gun control. Sometimes it's aspects of, it could be about political freedoms, supposedly, immigration. There's so many different events where these things take place. There's incidents that supposedly inspire intense emotions, and specifically with those that are the ones that are swallowing what the mainstream media tells them to believe about the event. The initial media stories usually conflict with the eventual official story. These, again, when you monitor an event like this, or any sort of event, and I was watching this live when this happened. I had multiple streams open. I was monitoring social media. I was on top of this. And when it happened, I instantly knew what we were looking at. Now, but continuing on this image here, no one's allowed to see the dead bodies. In this particular case with Charlottesville, only one individual died, but as the image that I will show you in a moment, she was nowhere near the vehicle that this individual is in right now. She died of a heart attack because she was an overweight troll, 330 pounds at 5'4", and she was not even hit. There was similar drills held nearby. And in fact, on this day, there were similar drills being held. The mainstream media manipulation tactics, as always, to try to deflect from the topic. And then the federal government provides attention to this issue. And despite the fact that it's clear that this is a strange event. I almost said the bad word. But we know that there's something here, and there was massive government involvement. Many people don't even know. When they see the news headlines, for example, that 4 people died at Charlottesville, many people don't even know that 2 of those individuals were actually state police who were in a helicopter monitoring the scene, and their helicopter mysteriously went down. Did these individuals see where the initial vehicle crashed into the supposed protesters and then stopped later? And there's eyewitnesses reports to this, where the individual who was in the vehicle got out, and then James Alex Field Jr. got into the vehicle and was subsequently arrested. But who was it? As you can see, the image that I'm showing right now, there's a confliction with what's been told. We have clearly an individual in the vehicle that matches 33-year-old James G. Field, and he doesn't look anywhere close to the individual that they eventually arrested, James Field Jr. James Alex Field Jr. So if we start to examine the physical evidence that was present at the time that this occurred, we start to see, and as that graphic I just previously showed you, the initial reports are usually more accurate, and I spoke about this. Well, this Jim Field, operations officer, was one of theirs. Somebody working in the deep state, somebody who was given a job to do, and did the job. And that is another thing that the deep state uses, is names that are extremely similar. So you've got an operator like James Field, as displayed here in the image, who has a lot of experience to be able to conduct an operation like that. And yet at the same time, there's a parallel program happening, and I'm revealing truth here, a parallel program that's happening that has individuals that share a name extremely similar to that person. These individuals normally are under the influence of psychotropic drugs, and usually conduct these mass shootings that help push the narrative that there's a need for more gun control. But when you dig into the past of those individuals, you see that they've been exposed to hospital visits where, again, normally mental programming usually occurs, like Project Monarch and MKUltra type projects occur. You've got the influence of prescription psychotropic drugs that further affect that. And you've got the strange ability that these individuals get access to firearms that they normally wouldn't have access to. So it all points to the fact that these individuals are set up specifically to push a certain purpose, narrative, and you always have those individuals that share those names very similarly so that they can utilize that as a cover to conduct the operation and then quickly slip into anonymity and disappear under the veil of the dark and deep state. Now I'm going to show a few more images here. I do see that there are a few people watching there right now, and if you have any particular comments that you'd like to add, I encourage you to do so. If you have any questions that you would like to pose, please write them in the chat or give me a call on Skype at Devious Dave Rose. There is so much that I could show you graphic wise alone, images that basically prove a lot of things that many people don't want to speak about, that many things that the media, that Project Mockingbird don't want to show you. Like, for example, this image that I'm going to show you right now. And for those that are joining us, I do appreciate it. You guys are getting some inside information that many people might not even witness. But in 2001, there was 85 surveillance cameras that failed to capture even one event. 1 second of a video of a Boeing crashing into the Pentagon. But in 2017, 2,000 surveillance cameras failed to capture even 1 second of a man carrying 47 guns, ammo, cameras, and 2 shooting platforms into a well-known casino and hotel. So is that a huge coincidence, or are they hiding something? And the information that I can discuss about Las Vegas is a lot. And since we're here, why not do it? I'm just going to bring some of these images in here right now. Show you what I've learned as well. Because there's a lot of information that a lot of people are not aware of when it comes to what happened in Las Vegas. And it is another one of these strange events. Another occurrence that has too many red flags that make you question exactly why it occurred. Now, something that many people aren't aware of is that there was multiple helicopters flying over the scene that night. And one of them, at least one of them, landed on the Vegas Strip and actually had teams of hired contractors, mercenaries, that were on there. So let me just show you a few of the images that were captured by some of the individuals that are out there that night. Again, these images aren't going to be shown by the mainstream media. Now, this image that I'm showing right now is basically one of the helicopters that landed in the middle of the street. There were several of these SUVs with armed individuals that were securing the area during this time. Let me show you another one here. You can clearly see the helicopter in this one, although in this one right now what you're seeing is the bright light from the searchlight of the helicopter. You can actually see the blades on top of it and so forth, but and obviously the contractors, the mercenaries in front of you pointing their firearms towards those that are holding the cameras. But in this one you see the helicopter further in the background but still on the street. This SUV again with these paramilitary contractor mercenaries that are essentially securing the area. And we're going to show you one more here. Again, very interesting images that have come out from this event. I'll show you some more. Yeah, this sort of gives a good idea as to where the supposed shooting took place and the area that surrounded it. Now what I'm going to do for you is give you a special treat in regards to what I've learned in regards to this. So essentially, this is one aspect. There's several aspects that run into this whole story, and there's so much information that actually backs it up. And I'm starting to think that I'm going to have to set up some sort of Dropbox if people want to access this information to basically have access to the same information that I have. But the Las Vegas situation, strange event, was in combination an attempted coup and assassination that essentially went wrong. So King Faisal of Saudi Arabia had a son called Prince Al-Walid bin Talal. And King Faisal basically got ill, and his brother, Salman, was named as king in his place. So King Salman and his sons, and his son is heir to the throne, was Prince Al-Walid. So this guy's a Wahhabist, okay, an extreme, Islamicist, and he basically owns the upper floors of the Mandalay Bay resorts, including the 32nd floor that was one of the points of the shooting. So there were other locations where there were shootings that night. Several hotels encountered the same situation. Now, it's very important to know that Paddock, the individual that was supposedly involved in the situation, was a pilot, and most importantly, he was a gun runner that flew weapons between the United States and the Philippines. He actually had a girlfriend that was from the Philippines that was announced at the time of this whole event. So he was actually running guns for Prince Al-Walid. And he was being given a lot of money from both sides, the CIA, the Saudi Crown Prince, other secret services and stuff to do what needed to be done. And essentially, he was able to launder money and actually lose money because it was a cover for the operations that he was doing. Because of his influence, he actually had access to the service elevators in the Mandalay Bay Resort. Never questioned, obviously, and the guests that he had with him never were questioned either. So on the night of the attack, King Salman was basically in Las Vegas at the Tropicana. And when Paddock, who was there to essentially set up another weapons deal, but this was sort of a setup for him. Okay, he'd been running guns for a while, but this was sort of a setup to create chaos and to allow for a strange event to occur. So dealing with the individuals in his room, this is when the event went down. He was killed, and the shooters at that location, the ones that killed him, basically were able to utilize the weapons that he had sort of collected and brought up 32 flights to his private hotel room to conduct this affair. These individuals also were able to escape to helicopters that were waiting for them on the roof of this building. There was actually shooters not only on the ground of both helicopters, or both hotels, I should say, in that particular vicinity. Although, again, there was at least 4 hotels, resorts that were essentially attacked that night. But there were also basically shooters that attacked from the air, from helicopters. So you can find these videos of this attempted attack on King Salman, where he is ushered out of a hotel, I believe it is the Tropicana in Las Vegas, surrounded by 30 guys with machine guns, like full-out auto machine guns, body armor and everything, including, American sort of support teams, to usher him out of here when this event occurred. So it needs to be understood that this event that occurred was actually multiple covers attempting to essentially push one agenda. That's what many people don't seem to understand. And there's a lot of information that points towards this, especially when you start to take a look at who was funding who. And when it comes to the shooter, for example, Paddock, he is well known for his involvement with the deep state, with drug running, with weapons running, and he is essentially somebody that was known to the authorities, but because he was working with them. One image I'm going to show you right now is that Stephen Paddock was actually in the room when he checked in. He was with multiple individuals. Here we go. And this information is available in police transcripts, in reports, but strangely enough, the authorities found no motive for this event. Now, very strange when there's so much information out there that actually shows that, in fact, there was a motive, and that Stephen Paddock wasn't the individual that his supposed twin brother claims he was on the videos he's made publicly. And there's a lot to be questioned in regards to his twin brother, if in fact it is his twin. But these strange events are things that people should keep their eyes open about. For example, something that many people have totally forgotten because of the memory hole that's created by Project Mockingbird. But doesn't anybody remember the shooting that occurred at the Google headquarters in California? And do they forget the fact that the shooting was actually conducted by a woman? A woman who had actually publicly shown her disgust with YouTube for censoring her videos. And she was an Iranian woman. Strange that she doesn't wear the hijab, although there's so much push in America to wear hijab, although there's no connection towards religion, and it's more of a cultural sort of situation. But nobody remembers this. And if you really start to dig deep, this was another one of these strange events that occurred because an individual not only had some mental conditions, but because a certain narrative had to be pushed. There's a lot of information that doesn't fit the narrative, and yet all the information backs it up. For example, like this. I'm going to show this to you right now. Now, we know that Broward County, for example, has had to deal with some issues in the past. Not only school shootings, but also suspected voter fraud and even supposed mass shootings. But if you start to dig deep as to who's involved, you start to always see that A, there's a Democratic connection. B, there's always some sort of deep state connection in this. And C, very often there is a connection to pharmaceutical drugs. Now, I remember each and every single one of these individuals and what they're connected to, but many people don't. And a big reason for that is because the media tries to memory hole these situations. As soon as it comes out that it doesn't fit their narrative or this story has gone as far as it can, they bury it and they move on. Doesn't anyone remember the shooter in Florida? You can see him there in the middle row on the left. Can't remember his last name, but his first name was Cesar. I believe it was Cesar, but he ended up he adopted that name. He wasn't even Latino, and he was the individual that had a van that had pro-Trump messages and stickers posted all over it. But it was essentially said that he was it's been proven that he's a Democrat supporter. He's a registered Democrat, donated, been involved with their fundraising campaigns and so forth. But strangely enough, he was pro-Trump when he conducted his failed attack. There's too much information. There's the guy in the bottom right corner. I can't remember his last name. His first name is, I think it's Israel, or maybe that's his last name. But he allowed for the school massacre to occur by the guy that is above him, Nicholas Cruz, who that's his adopted name. That's not even his real name. Who is also on psychotropic drugs. There's a lot of very strange occurrences in Broward County and a lot of fraud that occurs. Many people aren't aware of that, but Florida really is the epitome of the Florida man that the memes show. All right, so let's show a few things, a few more images here on the video, and I'm going to catch up on what the chat is saying because it looks like there's some stuff going on there. I also want to show some good images with you. Oh, here's a good one. Here's a good one to sort of view how to determine what's incoming. And I didn't censor the one word, the two words I should say that I need to keep censored here, but you know what I'm talking about. So I'll let you read that. I'm going to just dive into the chat here. Bear with me here. I apologize for any dead air. And just in regards to the chat, don't worry about that. That's, again, not my worry or concern. But this is an interesting image nonetheless. And when you start to monitor these sorts of things, you start to see a pattern. I just noticed that the whole image isn't showing, so I'm just going to fix that here. But basically, there's a lot of information out there that you can find that conflicts with the official story. And when you make that little bit of effort to examine this, you'll start to see exactly the same thing that I'm talking about. These aren't sort of revelations in the sense that I'm not breaking them, but they're there if you look for them. Now I just want to remind people that if you've got any questions, please post them in the chat here. And if you want to give me a call on Skype, just ring me up at Devious Dave Rose. And 718 Project in the chat brings up an extremely great point, something I do have notes on, but would take some time to pull out. But do you remember the DC Sniper? Absolutely do I. I remember that when it was happening. I was a teenager. Was very concerned about it, although I don't live in America. But just the apparent random ways that this was occurring was quite concerning. A lot of people did die. And eventually it was found out that there was 2 individuals that were involved, essentially a Muslim convert and a young man that he attempted to brainwash to do his job. And they took extensive sort of stances and positions to make it extremely easy for them to conduct that operation. There was also a lot of drugs, pharmaceutical drugs and mental involvement in that situation that, again, makes you think about Project Monarch and MK Ultra. 718 Project also says, I was still stuck in the Matrix when that went down, never really looked into it. It was I remember when it went down, and it was odd because of how effective it went down. But, you know, there were a lot of questions that sort of left red flags. And eventually, you know, information started to come out, and it made it a lot easier once the internet was a little more accessible to be able to check up these people's history with psychiatrists and such. And then the whole picture starts to come together, which is, again, another one of these Manchurian candidates that are set up to push a narrative, you know, gun control or whatever. 718 Project again in the chat says, same here. Recall the TV series, and it seemed like BS to me now, shooting through the keyhole aspect of it. Well, technically it is possible. That's the thing. If you do have enough hearing protection, you can definitely pull it off. But again, anytime that you encounter an individual that might be involved in one of these sorts of operations, these sort of psyop operations, psyops, psychological operations, you do have to question the methods that are used. I agree with you there, because even with some strange events that have occurred, the problem is there's so many, because and they keep getting buried. I mean, I could literally bring up tons of them, but there are events where, and this applies to many, but I'm just trying to generalize here to go through to get through this conversation. There are many events where multiple individuals die from a supposed mass shooting or some sort of supposed terroristic event, and realistically, anybody that understands firearms, close quarter combat, things that an actual soldier would understand, know that it's just impossible to happen, to occur, with the way that it is not only described on media, but also displayed with the supposed number of casualties. There's so much information that disproves what the mainstream media says, but because most people don't either question that or don't do the research necessary to verify if that's true, you get another sort of fantasy that is just allowed to pass. It's just another narrative that is just swallowed by the public. Civil 19 Project says, always thought there were more accomplices involved. Absolutely. And in many cases, even, for example, the Oklahoma City bombing, there was many accomplices that were involved in that. And that's not spoken about. Nope, they just talk about the one guy. And if you look at the pattern, there's been an attempt to establish sort of a narrative that you have a white supremacist problem in the United States, which is quite the opposite. And Timothy McVeigh was basically made one of those poster childs for that. And 7119 Project says, craziest one by far is Aurora Shooter, by the kid researching erasing memories and potential use for PTSD. Father worked for DARPA. Very good point. Just tuned in. Sorry if you already touched on this. No, I did not talk about that specifically. We started about Charlottesville. Talked about a few other topics, but I wanted to leave it open to everyone that would be joining us to add a few things. But you're making some great points there as well. The Aurora Shooter, and I did speak about this the other day in regards to the current climate and the current news that are occurring in the United States. But the Aurora Shooter was actually one of these multiple patsies that were utilized with the use of pharmaceutical drugs to make him a patsy and pass off an agenda. That's all it is. And the Democratic connection always comes up over and over again. That's not to say that Republicans are free of this sort of accusation and stuff. I mean, there was a Republican, I can't remember who it was, but somebody involved with the Republicans the other day who was essentially connected with some sort of child abuse scandal. I'm not excusing any party, but when you continue to see these sort of connections show up, specifically with those that are involved with the Democratic Party, you start to realize that things go a lot deeper than people might imagine. And the bigger thing to me is follow the money. Follow the money, and you can actually find out who is basically causing some of these events. And more often than not, you will see that there are individuals that are connected to the Democrat Party that are the ones that are causing many of these events. But it's just not politics alone. There's the drug aspect, the pharmaceutical aspect, the fact that these individuals are not only under some sort of medication, but also in some sort of counseling. And isn't it strange that individuals sometimes that are in counseling immediately go and conduct some sort of weird shooting or mass attack? Enter Project Mockingbird. Enter MK Ultra. The mind control projects, and there's been many, Started with Project Monarch. MKUltra, one of the more recent ones, but there's many more involved. They're all designed for specific purposes. You've got the beta kittens, individuals who are essentially groomed specifically to go into a mind control altar that allows them to be a sex slave. If you really want us to start to dig deep on this, look into those in show business that are wearing leopard stripe clothing. That's an immediate indication of MKUltra projects and beta kitten programming. There's alphas, betas, gammas, deltas, and many more. Some of them serve the purpose to be an assassin. Some of them serve the purpose to garner information. Some of them serve the purpose of being spies. Some of them are essentially sexual honeypots. But mind control programs are real. This has been proven. And they all serve a specific purpose. Now back to the chat here. Nick Wolf says George Soros. George Soros is just the tip of the iceberg. He's a face man. Got 718 Project says SSRI drugs trigger all these dudes like murder bots. Very true, but that's just some of the drugs. ELF vibrations keep them in this trance. Now there's a key. ELF, extremely low frequency vibrations. Something that ionospheric heaters, such as HARP, can produce. And even nowadays, the cell towers, and that's going to be even worse with the 5G towers, can essentially emanate these extremely low frequency vibrations. And through the patents that exist, that can be proven to exist, that have been stated by the government that they're going to utilize, these technologies work and are working currently to manipulate the minds of the people around them. This is fact. It's undeniable and it's unarguable. I can show you the proof if you're actually interested in learning. Or you can just read a regular newspaper because they make it plain as day. But it's there. And you got to be aware of it. Now going to the chat back again, we've got Reptilian Society says, that Sandy Hook shooter looks like he's on mind control agent. Looks at all the eyes in the mugshot pics. Yes, Adam Lanza is definitely under some sort of mind control. He is an individual that may have not even existed, to be quite honest. The pictures that are shown of him seem to indicate that the background has been manipulated. And it's very possible that, again, and I remember this, I have a very good memory, to be modest. And I followed this moment by moment. But initially, his brother was arrested, if anyone remembers. And then he was released. And they said, oh no, it was the younger brother that did it. Well, coming from a deep state family, very possible that the Adam Lanza individual didn't even exist. The one that perpetrated the crime was his older brother. And then when he was finally captured, they could always say, oh no, it was this other individual who was actually just a creation. And they now were able to pass it off and keep that family still working within the system. A lot of information in this. Yep, so 718 remembers that as well. and his brother was arrested. And that's really what probably frustrates me the most, is the fact that despite the fact that I can remember every single detail, or almost, that is provided when it comes to a situation like this in the timeline that is presented, the media just flushes it down the toilet. It just becomes memory hold. They just push it down there, sweep it under the rug. No one remembers, and then they go on to the next issue. But it's still pushing the same narrative. Oh, we've got to get rid of guns, or we've got to enact more draconian laws, or we've got to crunch down on free speech. But it's always the same thing. Doesn't matter what the particular event occurs, they're going to try to push the same sort of narrative that is going to help them accomplish their goals. Now, before we move on, to be quite honest, I have gigabytes of images, screenshots, you name it, of strange events and of other situations. For those that are actually listening today, and I do appreciate that you are joining us here tonight, throw out some topics or give me a call. Starting to think that nobody wants to give me a call, but that's fine, I guess. But I mean, I could talk about so many different topics, and I don't want to ramble on too much on one particular topic, because maybe some of you already know about this. I'm sure you do. Maybe some of you, already get it and be like, okay, I want to research that on my own. I don't have to keep hearing you bring up the same sort of, aspects of this thing. I know it's sneaky. I know it's smelly. I know I got to look into it. Because again, I'm presenting this information as I know it. It's up to you to basically figure it out whether or not what I'm saying is real or not. Don't trust me. Do your own work. But I do have, again, images that I can display for your pleasure, for your enjoyment, that could address some of the topics you might be interested in, some of the topics you might be curious about. So help me out here, because I am solo with no co-host, and usually I can run that fairly well, but I keep forgetting that I need to hydrate myself, so I'm going to take a moment here to have a drink. All right, we got our first question here. We got Brimstone's Shot. Thank you for joining us here. And he says, "Hey Dave, do you believe in human cloning? Not only do I believe in it, I know it. I know it's an absolute fact. I can show you evidence that proves this. This has been actually happening since the 70s. Only as of recently has it been has it advanced to the point where you can see it publicly in certain areas like China, like Cuba, but there are organizations that have been funded sufficiently to allow for active human cloning. This is old technology, to be quite honest. 718 Project says UN Agenda 2030 and how AOC plan is basically a watered down version. Absolutely. It's just it's an attempt to sort of like force people in that direction. I find it very funny that when she did present that to the Congress, that it was not only voted down, but every single person in her party also voted it down. So it goes to show that even the globalists see that it's something that won't even benefit them. It is literally millennial mentality garbage. It is this individual is pushing a concept that is not only viable, it is insanity. And I should actually add that I'm not sure if people in the chat know how she got that job. It's not necessarily that she ran politically, but there was actual, and you can look this up, it's already proven, it's all out there for you to learn. There was actual actor tryouts for that position. And because the Democrats saw her as, I don't know, I personally don't know how or what they saw in her, but she's clearly easy to manipulate. I don't think she's attractive in the slightest. But they consider her young. She's 29, she's young, she's full of vitality, and she's willing to push our message and stuff. Every time I think about her, I sort of my stomach really gets sort of ill. I find her a disgusting individual, not only physically, which really shouldn't matter in regards to a political aspect, but if anyone tries to say, "Oh, she's sexy," I want to puke in my mouth. But politically, she's incompetent and unsexy. I don't even know where to start. Again, I'd have to give myself a lobotomy to sort of even start to speak on how stupid her plans are. And everyone sees that, including her own party. What does that tell you? So you got 718 Project says, exactly, homie. They just passed a goddamn plastic bag ban in New York today. That's insane. At least here in Canada, they charge you 10 cents for it, which is still bullshit. But it also fits with the autocratic method of New York City, where you guys had to deal with the whole taxing of high sugar drinks. You couldn't have the extra large Slurpee at McDonald's or at 7-Eleven or whatnot and stuff. And it goes to show that despite the fact that your crime is going up and you're dealing with other economic problems, let's just talk about people getting fat, because that's a big deal, right? Not the fact that, our city's going to get close to bankrupt. No, or that we're going to invite all these illegals by declaring ourselves a sanctuary city. No. Let's talk about fat people and banning them from drinking, sugary drinks. Although it's not all fat people drinking those drinks. I see the same shit up here in Toronto. And I'm not in Toronto, but having lived in Toronto most of my life, I still follow the politics because it is, again, it's like New York or LA. It sort of governs economic, drive of the region. So what happens in Toronto, if it's good, it does benefit everyone. And it's very similar to the same thing here. They concentrate on topics that have absolutely no value and ignore the real issues. So back to the chat. Yeah, yes. Her chief of staff, 718 Project says, yes, her chief of staff apparently was supposed to be pushed, but he sucked at public speaking. She just has a nice set of tits. And that's the problem. When people are judged more on their looks, we're literally going to get fucking Idiocracy. And I recommend anyone who hasn't seen that in the chat to watch that movie because it's very telling on what direction we're going in. But right now, you've got a dick and you claim you're a woman, you've got value. You're prime candidate to be a politician, or you're a illiterate Hispanic donkey-faced whore, but you got a nice pair of tits. Let's get you on the docket and have you work for the Democrats. Oh, you're whiter than fucking paper, but you claim to be 1024th Native American. Let's get you on the docket. You know, it's pure insanity. I mean, I've never seen this state of clown world in my life. Yeah, and I've experienced a lot of election cycles in Canada and in America and the world, but what we're seeing right now is just it's insanity. And the Democrats keep doubling down. They're pushing people out of their own party because they're infighting. And I mean, to be quite honest, I think it's hilarious because there's a lot of people in the or who were in the Democratic Party or who, you know, sort of belong to that never fought for their party. They basically just let them all just go to shit and really never were concerned with trying to keep their party sort of centralized. And now what you have is extremists in the Democratic Party. You've got like Ilhar Oman, I believe her name is, who is a senator in was it Minnesota, basically just calling for Sharia law. You've got all these members of the Democratic Party that are basically, with their actions, pushing anyone that considered them themselves a Democrat in the past. They're pushing them towards the right, even though they don't want to be there. Like, they're making more Republicans than they are Democrats. And this isn't like some sort of nefarious plan. They really are that inept. They double down. This isn't like some sort of plan that the Republicans, because a lot of the majority of Republicans really are just still globalists, and they're trying to work against Trump and the nation. But they do realize that their time is short and they could be easily taken care of if Trump wanted to. But they recognize more their position than the Democrats do, and they don't try to push the identity politics as much as the Democrats do, who are, again, forcing people that were once considered like leftists. They're pushing these people to the point where they, like the Democrats, consider these people part of the right. Even though these people were like, I was always a leftist. I always supported like socialist health care and this and that. No, if you don't, fall in line with the basically communist belief of the Democrats, you're their enemy. And many people are starting to finally wake up to that, which hopefully will lead to Trump's reelection in 2010. I don't want to jinx that or anything, but this is something that they brought upon themselves and are purposely pushing. So back to the chat here. Let's see, we got a few more comments since I went on my little diatribe, but Reptilian Society says, do you believe any of the individuals involved in events could potentially be clones under some sort of mind control? I'll tell you why I don't think so. Because I think those items are reserved for special events. They're, these events, which I can't really say what they are, as you refer to them in the chat, without this channel getting banned. These events are a little more lowbrow compared to when you're going to need to utilize an actual clone. And there have been events where there has been the need to utilize a clone. I'll get to those instances at some other point in maybe a future episode. I can't go into them now because they're not directly related, but you have something there. You have something there, I think, more than you know. We're going to go to the next comment here in the chat. Nick Wolf says, will the generation after the millennials, aka Generation Z or aka Generation Zyklon, and that's what I'm adding, return to conservative values as backlash to the current BS. Actually, that's why many people are calling them Generation Zyklon, because they are probably the most conservative generation in about 3 generations. They are showing not only an awareness to at least a large aspect, not all of them. Some of them are very, very retarded. But they are showing sort of a knowledge of how bullshit the media is, and they're fairly savvy on how to pick that stuff up and realize when they're being lied to. And they're also very well aware of meme magic. They know how it works. They know how to make it work, and they can see through, the attempts to sort of utilize that against them. So I think there is hope in the young generation. And there are a big number of them that are they're willing to continue the fight, and they're aware of the skills that they need, including, again, using meme warfare, which is a real thing. People don't understand how powerful that is. And it's extremely powerful. It's also, to a certain extent, spell casting, but that's a different issue. But we have reached a tipping point. We have reached a point where essentially a lot more people are seeing through the bullshit, but they're not just tired of it, they're starting to fight back. It's not just like comments on Twitter, it's not just creating memes and stuff, it's actually starting to go out and protest or take a stand. There are people that are doing things like even in high school, for example, having a meeting with a bunch of people wearing MAGA hats in a liberal school, and despite the fact that they know that all these individuals around them want to kill them, they've got the bravery to do so. People are now starting to take the steps to show those of low IQ, to show those that are treasonous and traitors towards the human spirit, that they've reached their end point. Because despite of the economic growth that are currently occurring in the United States, unfortunately, we are in for an economic collapse of some sort. And coupled with all the division and racial divide that exists in the United States, and the continued existence of power by the Clinton mafia, we're going to see at least civil discord, if not a full-out race war. Mark my words. It's called the Cassandra Syndrome. You might not believe me, and that is my curse, as the gods have willed it. But it is what will pass. I can assure you of that. Might not be tomorrow, might not be next year. But my record is very clear. I know what is to happen. I've seen the information to prove it. And I could provide it to you if you wanted it. But unfortunately, we are faced with a dire future. And minus an event where we could snap our fingers and everyone became loving and aware to their fellow man, which I would love, we can only see conflict in the near future. This is just fact. Now let me take a drink and then I'll go right to the chat. I'm starting to think I might need to want to get one of those baseball hats that they have at the games with the beers that wouldn't require me to utilize my hands to have a drink as I speak to you here. So, we've got, let's see, I've got to catch up here. Oh, This is really filling up here. I didn't realize that we'd have all these questions. I do appreciate that, and I encourage much more. So let's see here. 718 says, 17 Project says Butterface. Not sure what that refers to. That's fine. I could go for a Butterfinger right now. I love those candy bars. He also continues with with illegals are eligible for driver's license in NYC and in California and in Texas and in Oregon and in many other places. That's another episode altogether, but the fact that America is basically burning money on allowing illegals to take advantage of your system it's disgusting. And it's happening here in Canada. So not only do I feel for you guys, I'm also just as outraged because it's really our governments that are allowing us, the taxpayer, the ones that are paying for this third world garbage, to take advantage of our system. Reptilian Society says, have you heard of the people genetically engineering the fetus for specific desirable traits? They're called designer babies. That's actually been talked about at least since the early 90s. I remember following that quite well. Right now in China, they're starting to push what's called CRISPR, CRISPR. I can't remember the exact designation for that, but basically what it is eugenics, genetically modified children. The Chinese, again, as soulless as they are, have always desired a genetic superiority because that is within their ethnic beliefs. They consider themselves genetically superior, and that is what they're going to want to try to do with any sort of medical involvement when it comes to their development. And it's not just them, though. South Koreans as well have been involved with this. There's rumors that the North Koreans have also been involved in human cloning. Cuba, Switzerland, and a few other places throughout the world. But the technology, like I said, has been at least around since the 70s. There have been demonstrations that this works perfectly fine with animals, and they're even advancing that technology with the animals. It's quite clear that the technology exists. Now, what if it's possible that we started cloning actual humans back in the 70s? How many do you think we might have now? Where do you think they would be? What positions they would be in? More importantly, ask yourself this. Why are there so many actors in Hollywood and other industries that look so similar? Now, I wish I had all the images to show you right now, but I'm sure that you can start to remember these. There's Renee Zellweger, and there was, and help me out, Chad, if you can remind me who that other individual was that looked very similar to her. And that's just one example. But yeah, they don't look that very similar. But when you start to take a look at all the different Hollywood stars that actually do look similar, that are essentially almost clones of each other, you realize that there's a lot more truth to the story, especially when you start to hear rumors that certain actors or stars have been replaced. And although they might be almost indistinguishable, you always get these weird stories coming out that a witness says that they were replaced, that they're not that same person. Now, maybe one time we can dismiss it. 2 times, okay, maybe, there's some sort of repetition in mental illness. But when you start to see more than that, and you keep seeing the same situation, especially with Hollywood, you start to realize that there's a lot more truth to the probability, not possibility, probability, as in it's most probable that it did happen, that there are multiple clones that are being utilized, or cloning systems that are being utilized to keep stars in check, and if they fall ill or they need to be replaced, then you've got the easy opportunity to do so with this technology. Now, this obviously is a far advancement from what you see in the 60s, where John McCartney actually died in an accident. Sorry, not John. Paul McCartney. Paul McCartney. The rumors that sort of established themselves in the 60s and 70s were true. They showed him on the album on Abbey Road with no shoes, referring to the fact that he was dead. And when you start to dig deep into this, you realize that he was replaced by Billy Shears, who is referenced in the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album, and had the necessary surgery to look very similar but not exactly to him. And I will share that information in the near future. But that's just one example of how in the days where you didn't have cloning available, you could make do with those that want to be part of the plan. So back to the chat here. We've got Reptilian Society says, have you heard of people... Oh, I think I already read that. Yes, I did. Brimstone Shot says, why are there even Republicans and Democrats? They seem useless to me. They just cause problems. Well, the reason why is because... Actually, this is a perfect opportunity for me to post this image. Fortunately, a little more unorganized than I should be today, but there was... oh, God damn it. I'm starting to get a little pissed off here. Where is it? Where's this fucking image? There we go. I do apologize. Again. Okay. So, let's go to this quickly here so I can refer to what I'm talking about. Come on, computer. Okay, so... going back to what Brimstone Shot says, why are there even Republicans and Democrats that they seem useless to me? They just cause problems. You're absolutely right, but why is that? Why is it that you've got these two supposed opposing groups still meeting in private, agreeing to whatever they want, and working out deals where they still get their way and they still get their funding? It's called the Hegelian dialectic. Okay, so first you start with the thesis, the problem. Could be a manufactured terrorist threat. Could be an inability to reach an agreement for healthcare funding. Could be anything you set it up to be. Well, with problem, you get a reaction. The public will react. That's the antithesis. So, with regards to a manufactured terrorist threat, you would get a repressive police state. The ability to enact laws to take away liberty for security. But it could also apply to almost anything else. Any sort of reaction to the problem that was set up artificially in the first place. And then finally, you've got synthesis, the solution. So with what we're talking about with manufactured terrorist threats, you get the removal of freedoms Rights and liberties are exchanged for the illusion of safety. And this sort of concept works perfectly every time with almost any topic or any interest whatsoever. So when it comes to Republicans and Democrats, they create the situation, they create the thesis, and then they both work together to create the antithesis. They say, okay, well, we'll vote against you here, but you'll vote for here, and we'll create this sort of equilibrium so that we all get what we want. We get all our funding, and the people are none the wiser. So going back to the chat here, we got 718 Project says, fun facts about AOC. Received $2 million in campaign donations, 60% from out of state. Less than 15,000 from her actual district. Very interesting. Also, she may be arrested and charged with some sort of fraud due to that and other aspects of receiving funding. Many people aren't even talking about it, as always. The media darling that is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. You know, fine Corinthian leather. She's not being talked about in the same way that Trump is being talked about. They only talk about good things about her, but they won't talk about the fact that she may be arrested for the fraud that she has been committing. 718 Project says Upper West Side of Manhattan donated $300,000 for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I'm sorry, I've got to do that every time because it's just so ridiculous. It's the only thing that, you know, might give some credence to her position, but a good name doesn't mean shit when it comes to the fact that she literally is retarded. Literally. 718 Project says, in your opinion, has anti-Semitism been kicked into high gear? Globalists or globalism are considered anti-Semitic terms. Criticism of Soros is considered anti-Semitic. Do you think they will stage an attack on Israel, start bombing on Iran? A lot of questions to answer. Let's go right through them. Let me first pick a nice image that will go with what I'm speaking with, or at least won't distract. So, let's start off with the first thing. Has anti-Semitism been kicked into high gear? I don't believe so. Although it has been sort of brought to light in a certain extent by all these individuals in the Democratic Party that are going against the normal Democratic narrative of supporting Israel and like basically just going full out Islamic terrorist Nazi, you know, statements. Like Israel must be destroyed and I mean like some crazy, crazy stuff. Now again, this is why I think a lot of people who are Democrats should have brought up arms towards this because your party was destroyed by these individuals. So right now there's a big pro versus anti-Israel fight within the Democrats alone. The Democrats have always supported Israel. Republicans, yeah, for the most part as well, but not as much as the Democrats had. So has it been kicked into high gear? I can't really say so. I mean, there are more people now aware of what Israel is doing and many more people that are sort of against funding them over, say, America. So that could maybe fit that bill in regards to maybe, say, the Anti-Defamation League's definition of anti-Semitism. But then again, they're way biased as it is. Anything that, is a criticism of anybody that's a Jew, whether they're secular or religious, like George Soros, is considered anti-Semitism. So we're already not playing on a level playing field. So we got to consider that. So globalist or globalism are considered anti-Semitic terms, yes. And that is what globalists do, aka Marxists. They try to change the definition of things. So you criticize somebody like George Soros, you must be an anti-Semite. Well, first of all, Semitic is both people that are of Jewish descent as well as of Islamic descent. They're Arabic, or of that region of the Levant. Okay? So to say anti-Semitic would be like to include that whole group. Now, if they're going to say anti-Jewish, okay, well, we can go with that. But this is the whole purpose of the Marxists, is when you control language, you can use this blanket term and try to convince people that you're a hateful person because, oh, you're an anti-Semite. Well, I might support, for example, Iraqi rights, but I don't necessarily support Israel's, action in the Gaza Strip. I'm just using an example, and that's not necessarily what I'm saying. But, oh, that makes you an anti-Semite. But hold on. How can you support an Arab who's a Semite, not support Israel, a Jew in Israel who's a Semite, and be declared anti-Semitic? That's the problem with the language, but that's always been the plan when it comes to Marxism, is you need to control the language. You need to. As soon as you can control the language, you can control people's thought patterns. Orwell did a great job in displaying this, but when you read actually the communist documents that were decided upon after the Communist Manifesto was published, you start to see exactly what the whole plan was altogether. Was basically control language, control education, then control people's actions, and like I said, Orwell nailed it perfectly. Continuing on, you'd say that, yeah, criticism of George Soros is considered anti-Semitic. Do you think they'll stage an attack on Israel, start bombing Iran? No, what's interesting and should be considered is that you never encounter, unlike America or other countries, you never encounter these strange events. False flag. Hopefully Google won't pick that up. But you never encounter that against Israel. You do encounter that against other countries. So I don't necessarily think that there'll be a false attack against Israel. If there is an attack on Israel, it will be the real deal. But it's not going to stop Israel from potentially conducting those events. I almost said the bad word again. It's not going to stop Israel from conducting those events to try to garner support from the international community, as well as to sort of trigger a response. If they can cause a fake event to occur, they got the justification necessary to take action. So, but the thing is, though, they're very precious and very concerned about their own population, so they're not really going to conduct it along themselves, against themselves. They're going to try to use another soft or hard target to conduct this, and then utilize the outrage from that to support their efforts, like we saw with New Zealand. Because look at all the talk now with the Golan Heights. A lot of people, a lot of countries don't want to recognize Israel's desire, demand to claim the Golan Heights. But this is what's been predicted since the New Zealand situation. Back to the chat. We got... Oh, no. I think we nailed it all. We got every single question. So that's good there. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on. Got to keep your eye out for what they're trying to do to you, what stories they're trying to pull over your eyes. And I agree, maybe it's difficult for you to keep up with all the news that comes out, to remember that even 5 years ago they pulled a similar prank, and although the information is out there, they buried it. But remember that this information is out there. All you really have to do is dig. And for those of us that are blessed and cursed to remember these events, it does sort of frustrate you to a certain extent when you've seen this for so long and it becomes so evident and so clear when a situation occurs and nobody else seems to believe it. But we're going to see more events that are going to make you question what's going on. And we see a lot of sloppiness when it comes to the efforts of those in the deep state. Because as I've said before, I do remember a time where I actually made an effort to make things believable. And yet nowadays, it's just so easy to tell that it was a lie. Let's go to the chat here. We've got Nick Wolf saying, is the European Union a construct of Nazi ideals? To a certain extent, what Nazi Germany had planned for Europe was similar to a certain extent, considering certain economic practices and regional controls and stuff. But the difference is that as opposed to the Nazi ideal that everything should be controlled from Berlin, this is more geared toward, like the EU is being more sort of focused towards control, specifically either from The Hague or from more specifically where the money is coming from, which is Switzerland and the City of London. So again, the ideals specifically behind it is a regional control utilizing economic power. And really, those that are the ones that give the money, that loan the money, are the ones that actually have that power, and those the ones that actually dictate how that money is going to be utilized. Now be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you like it, and give it a thumbs down already. We've got 4 thumbs up and 1 thumbs down. Look at that. Perhaps somebody who didn't like what I said about Charlottesville gave it a thumbs down. Maybe it's one of those deep state officers that doesn't like the truth being told. So we got 718 Project says, what do you think the motives was behind the Vegas massacre? Same as the others, pushing gun control or something? Actually, I spoke about it to some great length much earlier in the video. I gave a fairly good breakdown, I think, as to the reasons why I think it took place. It looks like it was about an hour and 15 in. So I don't want to bore the audience that were witnessing that earlier, but I did. I went into the reasons why I thought it occurred, and the agendas behind what would have been accomplished through that agenda. So just go back and watch the video again, and you'll find that information. Now, I'm wondering if anyone else has any questions as to what questions about what we're doing tonight, or maybe about topics that they want discussed, perhaps maybe want to call me up on Skype. I know I keep saying that, but and I'm sure that very few will. But for those that do, I appreciate you. Now, before we continue, I'm just going to go and just quickly touch upon some ionospheric heaters that currently exist on the planet. When somebody tells you that HARP is some sort of conspiracy or joke, well, you can tell them that they don't really know what they're talking about. You got all these examples here, whether it be in Alaska, USA, which is HARP, Finland and Norway, Australia. They have a few sections in Australia. Duka, Ukraine, Peru, Resco, Brazil, Narl, India, Sheshan in Shanghai, and Misa in Massachusetts. When you start to realize there's an array of these ionospheric heaters throughout the planet, you realize that they can be utilized in conjunction to do what your heart's desire is. You want to create an earthquake? You got it. Oh, we could utilize a tsunami in the Pacific Ocean. Well, there you go. Or, oh, we could maybe benefit from a drought in California. Not a problem. These are just the basics of utilizing portions of what is part of Agenda 2030. But there are many military white papers that discuss the need to utilize the atmosphere and the environment and the weather as a weapon against enemies. And I should just tell you that report was made close to 30 years ago. HARP has been around since the early 90s. How far do you think they've gone from there? Now, going back to the chat, we got 718 Project says John Brennan, who is a piece of shit, I should add, admitted to the use of chemtrails at a CFR speech. SAI project, yes. That's something that many people don't either aren't aware of or don't discuss. But it is something that the deep state has utilized for quite some time. Now, I believe SAI stands for Special Access Information. I know of SAP projects, which are Special Access Projects. And you need extremely high level, above top secret access to be able to participate in these projects. Nick Wolf says, were the locations of the pyramids around the globe ancient tech such as ionospheric heaters? No, I don't believe there were actually specific ionospheric heaters, but they were placed specifically on those locations because they are on ley lines and ley line nexuses, because they connect geomantically to the planet's grid system and allow for it to be manipulated. In the case of the pyramids, there was actual a pyramid structure throughout Egypt, utilized that, from my knowledge, was able to stabilize Earth energetic systems and essentially work as a healing sort of energy. There's a lot of aspects of the pyramids that I could go into, but they provided a lot of different benefits, but they aren't ionospheric heaters. They are, however, capable of interfacing with the atmosphere and with the environment, and due to their geometric shape as well as their location on these ley lines, these earth grid locations, they have a lot of power inertly in them that is magnified by the structure itself. Let's see if I can find some other images for you here. Maybe something that will... Oh, actually, yes. I'm surprised I didn't bring that image up yet. Just bear with me here while I try to find it. There's a lot of images that I have. Damn it. Okay, let's start over then. So be it. There we go. Now, I believe a few people had actually asked me to bring this up. Apologies again. Let's try this one more time. Now, some people had asked me to discuss a little more about the occurrences of what happened on 9/11, aka September 11th, 2001. Now, something that many people seem to ignore is that there were many sort of warnings towards this. Warnings that you're going to actually see images of right now. And as that comes up, I'm going to go to the chat again and read what 718 Project has. Has stratospheric aerosol injection. Oh, yes, that's what it was. SAI, stratospheric aerosol injection. So he said stratospheric aerosol injection program has put in place to battle climate change, blanket Earth from sun's UV rays, made me think of Carrington event or global blackout. I'll get to that in a second. Great point. Look at this image here right now. There's a lot of information that seems to point towards a pre-knowledge of what occurred on September 11th. I didn't make these images. This clearly, these are all images that were created by several different entities. So I'll leave it up to you to decide who's in the know. But back to what 718 Project was referring to. That's actually the story that has been told to many different pilots that are part of the project, of those that are part of this stratospheric aerosol injection program, that it is essentially for the benefit of humanity, and that they're spraying this stuff to protect humans and shield the planet from these supposed dangerous rays. Now, before we continue, I'm just going to show an aspect of this which really goes to show that there's a difference between what you see and what you're being told. Chemtrails are real. You can ignore them, you can deny them, you can pretend that they don't exist. I've already proven they have in a previous episode and many prior to that. I've shown the patents that exist. I've shown the evidence that exists. It's undeniable. It's essentially been proven. But more importantly, when it comes to the patents, they're the ones that basically prove this correct. And I'll show some of those right now. As you can see, this information is known. This information is patented. And more importantly, this information is ready to be profited from. After all, you're not just going to create a patent and not sell it. Follow the money, people. Follow the effects, and you will see the proof that exists. And the UN has now come out and basically admitted that they are utilizing aerosol programs to manipulate the weather. And yet people still deny that that's what's occurring. Now, I don't know about you. Back in the 90s, I remember looking up to the skies and seeing it a beautiful dark blue. But if you look up to the skies today, even on a clear day, the sky is not as blue as it should be. It's a sort of washed out color, a very gray silver color. And it only gets worse when these planes fly above you. These planes that people dismiss as if they don't have any interaction with your environment. But if you spend the day looking at the sky, you'll see that within a few hours, clouds start to move in. Strange patterns in the clouds start to occur. And what would have been a beautiful sunny day now has an overcast sky. We got 718 Project says, that woke you up, dude? For me, it was getting high and watching doc called Thrive, then Zeitgeist. Now, see, but what you need to understand is I noticed these things back in 1990 when I was 10 years old. I noticed when planes were flying over, and I'd always had an obsession with the sky and with flying as a pilot or somebody that worked in space. And I noticed immediately, and I started to ask. And no adult could ever give me a straight answer. Why is it that that plane now has this huge trail behind it? I've been awake to the chemtrail topic very long, in fact. And many people that, again, have been born in the last 20 years will never have experienced the sky that I experienced as a child. Look at the image that I'm displaying. A blue, deep blue sky. You won't see those these days. I remember witnessing them, but most kids will not. There's been constant aerosol spraying since the 90s. And most people are just so caught up in their own lives, or so arrogant in assuming that they are the center of their own universe, that they never bothered to look up to the sky to see what I saw. And I remember researching this information even in the early days of the internet. And despite the fact that the evidence was in front of people's eyes, they refused to believe it. But now in 2019, with the UN admitting that they are doing this actively, they are conducting aerosol spraying, I, yet again, get proven correct. And you should never allow anybody to dismiss your concerns because you notice something that they don't. Might take a few years for them to wake up, but if you notice these sorts of things, keep raising your voice. Keep bringing attention to these things, because eventually people will wake up. And more importantly, your record of speaking the truth will be revealed. And people will understand that you have a little more knowledge on this topic and you should be appreciated and considered when it comes to when you speak on such a topic. I know that many people, when discussing these sorts of topics, are a little hesitant perhaps to speak the truth, or perhaps even they're a little concerned that they might get a harsh reaction, but what alternative do you have? To lie? To just not speak the truth? Can you live with yourself for doing such a thing? Regardless of how people are going to react, if you truly value the truth, you're going to speak the truth, regardless how crazy it sounds. Because you know inherently that the facts will back you up and the truth will just prove you true. Now, we've been going on for about just a little over 2 hours. I think we've done fairly good so far. Covered a lot of things, specifically Charlottesville and some of these questionable events. If anyone has any further questions, I encourage you to put them in the chat. If you're so interested and inclined, you could give me a call on Skype at Devious Dave Rose. But I just wanted to do another episode tonight just to discuss a few things that a few people had mentioned. And before we go on, I actually want to speak in regards to a question I got on Skype. And I'm not going to identify this individual, but he did pose a good question. If he wants to identify himself, that's perfectly fine. But he did put a good question to me. Hey, Dave, I'd love to hear your opinion on Yellowstone supervolcano. For those that might not know, the Yellowstone supervolcano is an area under the Yellowstone Park area which may potentially blow out and create an Earth-level extinction event, smothering the Earth in soot and creating a not only a greenhouse effect, but a long-term ice age. So my response was as follows. From what I know, it does present an extinction level event, but I suspect certain geoengineering programs, like HARP, are able to decrease pressure in the affected areas to keep the thing in check and prevent it from going off. And when you start to take a look at the power of arrays such as HARP, you realize that it essentially can be manipulated to decrease pressure in certain tectonic plates and other areas, solely utilizing electromagnetic frequencies. Continuing on what he said, he says, what else do you suspect that they can control? Because if they can prevent it from going off, they must be able to control some other things. I eagerly responded with earthquakes and seaquakes, weather, droughts, and this technology can also be used for mass mind control. And with the utilization of these mass electrofrequency arrays, you do have the ability to manipulate the mind, to cause mass senses of panic, to cause memory loss, and to essentially kill millions of people. Nikola Tesla actually spoke about this when he discussed the world killer weapon. There's a lot of information that's being hidden from the public, a lot of technology that not only could be used for good, but is currently being used for evil. The science backs it up. The events back it up. And the money backs it up. All you got to do is follow those. Now let's go to the chat here. We got 718 Project says, any truth to Charles Darwin and Aldous Huxley being members of the same secret society? Yes, it does appear that they were both part of the same secret society. Aldous Huxley having written many books in regards to the esoteric and occult. And if you are willing to buckle down and actually do the work necessary, if you read the books by the individuals that are involved, they admit total truth. They do not lie. They tell you their plan. So if you have the time and you're willing to invest in it, you can read basically the manuals of their plan for conquering. And they're fully open about it. Just up to you whether or not you actually want to spend the time to read it. 718 Project says, do you think California wildfire was a result of direct energy weapon? Fun fact, this was actually in Robocop. Military mistakenly shot Cali and started catastrophic wildfire. Damn. So glad you brought that up. Number one, absolutely yes. Totally agree that the California wildfires were essentially aggravated. Not necessarily started, but aggravated by direct energy weapons. I can't seem to... I've been looking for the images, but I can't seem to find them right now. But I have several images in my collection which basically prove that this was not a natural wildfire. That was certain areas that were left out. They didn't burn, despite the fact that the areas around them were full of content materials that would have burned at extremely high temperatures to affect them. No, there were certain areas that were just totally untouched, certain areas totally burnt down, and it came at a time where there was a lot of deep state push towards trying to out Donald Trump. Without question, what we saw in California was a result of drones that were able to utilize this sort of directed energy weapon technology, but also satellites, or should I say orbital weapons platforms, that were able to utilize this technology to accomplish those goals. It helped very much, especially with not only clearing the area that has a lot of gold and other minerals underneath it, but it also is an area that would have been set up to benefit from the high-speed rail system that they wanted to set up in California. So when you start to realize that if you can get rid of residents in a certain area, desecrate and destroy their properties, and then buy them out quickly, that's a quick way of being able to establish a pork barrel type program where you're going to get a lot of federal funding to create a project that may never exist. A project that more probably the funds are going into black program events. So that's something to consider when it comes to what occurred in California with all the wildfires that were going on. I know we're going head first into the rabbit hole. Some that might be joining us might think this is a little off and a little odd, but I pride myself in the research that I do, and everything I state from my personal belief and knowledge, and everything I state, in my opinion, is the truth. Take that for what you want. But as I've said previously, knowledge belongs to everyone. It should never cost anybody anything to get that knowledge. It should never be required to negotiate the release of that information. It should always be available to everyone in its barest form. And it's up to the person who's listening to it to decide what they're going to do with that information. But there's no benefit for me to say anything but the truth. Now, I think we're going to start wrapping up the show. We've covered quite a few topics tonight so far. If anyone wants to speak to me on Skype, it's at Devious Dave Rose. If you have any final questions or comments that you want to add in the chat, I encourage you to do so. We got to cover a few topics here tonight that might not normally be discussed, but I am glad that I had the opportunity to at least share some of the knowledge I've acquired when it comes to these strange events. Events that they try to push under the rug, try to get you to forget, put up some other celebrity controversy like Jussie Smollett to make you forget what's actually going on. but I won't forget. And I hope you won't forget. And I'm making this video in hopes that maybe it'll help just educate other people. Plant a seed in their head and make them at least think differently. They don't have to take my word for it, but they should, if they value their own opinion, look into it and see whether or not I'm right or wrong. And in fact, if I am right, they owe it to themselves to follow that trail and to dive down that rabbit hole themselves if they truly value the truth. And on that note, I think we're just going to wrap it up. So I do appreciate everyone that's joined us here tonight for the last 2 hours and 15 minutes or so. We got to cover a lot of topics. We got to answer quite a few questions. I do appreciate those that did join us here tonight, offered their questions in the chat, gave their thumbs up in the video, as well as the one person that gave their thumbs down. Appreciate your hate. And be sure to join us in the next few days. I have many videos planned. I was hoping to go live yesterday. Wasn't able to do so, so had to do that today. But there are many other topics, just like the ones that we discussed today, that I plan to dig deeper in, provide more visual evidence to prove as to what I'm saying, and hope that you will join me on that journey. I'm Devious Dave Rose. This is Darkroom. Thanks for joining us, and keep your eyes to the sky.